The second half of scene 24, or Act 5, scene 3 if you've got a different version, continues with a gentleman entering with a bloody knife, around about line 217. And Albany asks, what means is this bloody knife? It's hot, it smokes, it came even from the heart of whom man speak, your lady, sir, your lady. Basically, we find out the Gonerilla's killed herself. She's killed herself, I guess, overcome with guilt, perhaps at killing Regan, or perhaps just accepting that they're not long for this world anyway. We get the repetition of hot, remember, where Goneril and Regan initially talking about striking in the heat, striking while the iron's hot. But then the fracturing of the relationship shown when Goneril says not so hot, and then we get it's hot. So we get that sort of coming full circle, it echoes the breakdown of the relationship. We also get the blood on the knife. Just like Edmund's blood, remember, was used to frame Edgar, there's that idea again that their blood is corrupted, their blood has almost been their undoing, that they've almost died of the disease that they represent. And of course, we've got Goneril killed, has killed herself. In Jacobean times, with that very strong Christian belief, they would believe that there was no redemption if you killed yourself. If you killed yourself, you were destined for a lifetime of suffering, basically, or I guess after your lifetime, you were destined to suffer. So Shakespeare doesn't give them any resolution at all. They don't die with any sort of remorse, really. They die in the way that the audience would in no way sympathise with them. And then that's followed up with Edmund saying about line 223, I was contracted to them both, all three, and then marry in an instant. Basically, I'm going to die now as well with them. So there's that sense that they're all united in death. Again, that sense that I guess that Shakespeare suggests throughout, that they all sort of represent the same thing, the new Machiavellian world. Albany starts reflecting on this, says, produce their bodies, be they alive or dead. This justice of the heavens that makes us tremble touches us not with pity. Basically, they've been dealt with, the heavens have given their justice and we tremble with fear, but no pity at all. This is a nice, neat ending, basically. And it's great because that is contrasted then as the play continues. Shakespeare seems to be going, right, there you go, there's your nice, happy, clear ending where everything's cathartic. It's clear, the bad have been punished, the good have been semi-rewarded, I guess. The wheel of fortune's turned. There we go, there's your ending. Of course, as O'Toole talks about, it's a false ending. The rug is then pulled up from under our feet. It's not as neat as that. Edmund explains basically that he had a plan about line 250, that they were going to hang Cordelia in the prison and to lay the blame upon her own despair that she fooled herself. So the irony that Goneril's just killed herself and they were going to make it look like Cordelia had killed herself. Albany then says, remember, Albany's just gone, this justice of the heavens makes us tremble but not with pity. Albany then says about line 251, the gods defender, exclamative, shouts it out. And then immediately afterwards, enter King Lear with Cordelia in his arms. So we get that sense of Albany saying, I trust in heaven, this has ended well, and then the gods defend it, and then immediately Shakespeare undermines that very idea. Cordelia hasn't been defended at all, she's lying there dead immediately afterwards. It's as though Shakespeare is deliberately setting up that moralistic ending to go, actually no, a religious reading doesn't work. Cordelia, the most obviously Christian character in this pre-Christian play, is now dead. We also get the image of Lear sort of sitting over Cordelia. I think that's Rutter's essay who talks about it. It's a reversal of the Virgin Mary over Christ's body, and that sense of Lear as this broken man, also echoing a famous woman from history, and he's shouting, hell, hell, oh hell. And we see as Kermode talks about this really unfair ending, there doesn't seem to be any justice in there at all. And Kent actually asks, is this the promised end? And it's a bit of a meta-theatrical line, it's as though Shakespeare's referring to his own play. Is this the promised end? The audience have been promised an ending that they'd expect in a Shakespearean play. We haven't got it. The wheel hasn't seemed to turn in the way that we'd expect. Edgar continues about line 258, or image of that horror. He basically misinterprets what Kent says. He's asking, he thinks Kent said, is this the end of the world? And he says, oh, no, is it just an image of the end of the world? And there is something apocalyptic again about this. The normal rules don't apply. I guess one argument for this is that Shakespeare's making us feel how Lear is. Lear is a man who has lived his life believing one set of values, and suddenly it turns out that they don't work anymore. Shakespeare's making us feel exactly the same thing, and so maybe one reason that he does this, and one way that you could debate with O'Toole, is perhaps he wants us to feel like Lear. We've got an ending for a Jacobean audience that works, that's moralistic, that's Christian, to then go, actually this doesn't work. The audience can't have this safe moral assumption that they might have otherwise. Ken kneels down, line 263, I think, armour, good master. All three of the old men have now kneeled. Gloucester kneeled not long before he died at Edgar's feet. Lear's kneeling and bowed over Cordelia, and now Kent has kneeled down. So the old order has all sort of gone. And that gives us that Wheel of Fortune imagery. But that just seems to emphasise the injustice of the ending. We could have a really nice, neat, cathartic ending where the old do fall down and the young rise up. But Shakespeare doesn't make this neat. He's just killed Cordelia. And then Shakespeare really emphasises about line 268. Lear says her voice was ever soft, gentle and low, an excellent thing in women. Even now Shakespeare's emphasising Cordelia's roles as the ideal Christian, domestic, Jacobean woman. And yet she's died, and even in her death, Shakespeare's really emphasising here that she's the ideal woman. He's showing us, the injustice of her death, I guess, showing us that this shouldn't happen in his play. Lear says about line 273, and these same crosses spoil me, basically my crosses to bear. Again, it's a Christian image. He's got his crosses to bear. He has suffered, but there's no, it's uncompensated suffering. That's what this tragedy seems to be, as Castan talks about. There's not an answer here. The absence of answers, as Castan says, makes this even worse as a tragedy. Lear says, mine eyes are not the best on line 275, I'll tell you straight. But of course, just like Gloucester, Lear is seeing more clearly now. And yet when he's seen clearly, we see the utter chaos here, that there's no moralistic ending. Kent says, line 283, that from your first of difference and decay I followed your sad steps. So again, the old are on their way out. Kent is following in Lear's footsteps to this decay. And then a great bit, line 289, Edmund is dead, my lord, Albany, that's but a trifle here. Basically Albany saying, who cares, and it's a great one to talk about with Edmund, who has sort of usurped his role and played the role of the bastard, and actually dies as the bastard. Who cares? There's more serious roles to play. So Edmund never really, escapes his role, I guess, ultimately. And then Lear says this really controversial line 300, and my poor fool is hanged. Some people interpret that to mean that Cordelia, the actor playing Cordelia, was the same actor as who played the fool in this play. And so it's a meta-theatrical line referring to the fact that it's the same actor. Others argue that Lear is calling Cordelia his poor fool, in other words, his fortune's fool. Others argue that actually he's talking about his own fool. He's saying, and they've hanged my fool as well. How we look at that maybe changes our meaning of the play, Is it that just it's more suffering for Lear? Is Shakespeare ultimately showing how Cordelia, despite all the criteria making of this ideal domestic woman, is just a fool in tragedy, that it doesn't work as neatly as we'd like? Or is Lear making this link between Cordelia and the fool, and perhaps maybe suggesting that even though she died, she sort of escaped her role? The fool's gone missing, the fool seems to exist outside the realms of the play. Remember, the fool's lines often link to the lines of Feste, the fool in Twelfth Night. He seems to escape the world of the play. Is Shakespeare suggesting that Cordelia is the same, that this Christian woman sort of escapes in the world outside the play? She'll be rewarded with heaven. On 306, Lear says, break heart, I prithee break. Echoes Gloucester. Gloucester's heart broke, and we're told that he died smilingly. Lear says the same thing just before he dies. There's that idea of the willingness of the old order to die, that they don't want to carry on living. And Ken sort of says that, at line 312, he usurped his life, basically lived longer than he should have done. He's been alive too long. And Ken's talking about himself there as well. Ken has gone on longer than he should. There's an ambiguous line there when Albany says about line 314, friends of my soul you twain, rule in this kingdom and the gourd state sustain. He's basically telling Kent and Edgar to rule with him. We don't know if he means rule with him or rule under him. Is this a new democracy that Shakespeare is showing us, or is Albany making the same mistakes as the past? And Kent's reply is a bit odd as well. He replies in a couplet which implies finality, and what he says is, I have a journey, sir, shortly to go. My master calls and I must say no. Basically, no, I'm not ruling with you, I need to die now. There's nothing left for me. So straight away, this new order that Albany's establishing is a little bit messy. Albany, the guy who takes a very Christian reading, heaven defender. It seems like it's been challenged here. Shakespeare is deliberately challenging, I think, the character that represents this. And then the last lines, are they spoken by Albany or Edgar? In my version, based on the quarto, it's Albany. In other versions, it's Edgar who speaks it. Again, I guess if it's Edgar, then it's a genuine sense of a new order prevailing. If it's Albany, this guy who was once married to Goneril, this guy who was just, cried out to the heavens, who haven't helped him at all, it becomes a lot more problematic. It becomes a lot less of a neat ending. And what he says is a bit peculiar as well. He says, the way to this sad time we must obey, speak what we feel, not what we ought to say. Okay, yeah, fair enough, I guess that ties in with Cordelia's moral, doesn't it? Speak the truth, speak what you think, speak nothing, if needs be. And then the last bit, the oldest have borne most, we that are young shall never see so much, nor live so young. What's he saying there? Is he saying the young won't make the mistakes of the old? They won't live on beyond, in a time that goes beyond them? Or is he saying something a little bit more problematic? Oh, the young won't make their mistakes, you know, we're all right. Or ultimately, is he saying, actually, our way of life is going to be challenged as well. We're going to be challenged. We're going to be old. We're going to be killed off as well. And I think the fact that this Christian reading doesn't quite work is that the latter is perhaps the most convincing argument. That what Shakespeare's saying to his Jacobean audience, he gives them this really, really clear moral at the end, but then goes, you know what, your way of looking at this doesn't work either. So almost foreshadowing our future readings that are going to come. That yes, you know, maybe King is God on earth, you know, King James is God on earth. Maybe we are a Christian nation now. Maybe a Christian reading works, but it might not always be the case. Maybe, you know, the longer we live, other readings will come. And so ultimately we have to be adaptable. And I think that's why Edgar and Albany are ultimately allowed to succeed and rule at the end. Kent's not adaptable. Edgar and Albany are. They can adapt, they can shape. And I think ultimately at the end of the play, it's the message to do that, to adapt. The only moral really is that there's no obvious answer. There is total chaos at the end. As O'Toole says, it's not a neat, nice ending. I think the message that Shakespeare gives us is you've got to keep adapting because the world's going to keep on changing. And so in the Shakespearean tragedy, he gives us, doesn't feel like a Shakespearean tragedy, to give us that message. So that is King Lear.